Hi, I'm G. Welcome back to my art channel, and today I'm showing you how to use ARTEZA's premium fabric markers. Each of the packs has got 30 coloured markers in it, and the markers are about the same size and thickness of a pencil. They've got a coloured cap, but there's no actual information on the marker as to what name of the colour is or any kind of identifying serial number. And on the back of the pack, it tells you that they are permanent, unique colours, non-toxic. You've got your usual QR codes for a bit of money off. And more helpfully at the bottom, you've got how to use them and also a bit of hints and tips on the fabric care after use. It's got a swatch on the back with serial numbers, and each of the markers also has a name. On the front of the box, it tells you that these dual tip markers have got an ultra fine tip and just a regular fine tip. So I thought I'd pop them side by side so you can see that's the ultra fine tip on the left and the fine tip on the right. And when you use them, this is what they look like. So this is the ultra fine tip I'm using, first of all, on an old t-shirt. And you can see it's got a nice fine line, and it's probably a little bit less than a millimeter. The fine tip gives you much more of a millimeter type thickness line, but also using the nib on its side, you can get some nice thicker effects. So then I thought I would swatch all of the colours so I could see what they looked like when they were actually on fabric rather than just going by the cap colour. So I started with my lightest colours, and the first thing that you can see when I'm putting on the yellow is that fabric drawing is kind of a bit tricky because the fabric, if it's not held really taut, snags with the pen as you try and do the strokes, and it's really quite infuriating. But that was what the colours all looked like when I'd swatched them at the end. So you had quite a lot of dark and mid colours, not so many light colours. So next I thought I'd put them to the test with a couple of t-shirts that I've been asked to design. So I thought I'd use the markers for this. So I chose some blue colours going from light to dark, and I made sure that the t-shirt was pegged down nice and tightly on a piece of board that I'd put in between the front and the back so that the colours wouldn't bleed. And next I swatched each of the four colours that I wanted to use, and I put the pen down next to each of the colours. So I knew when I went to pick them up which colour was going to be the darkest, the mid and the light tone. So I drew out the lettering that I was going to colour using a soft 2B pencil, and then I decided to do the outline first. So for the outline I decided to use the ultra fine nib, and you can see me kicking off with that straight away. And one of the first things that you should notice is even with the t-shirt pegged down, if I tried to do a really long stroke of colour with the nib, it would snag on the fabric. So what I decided to do, and what you can see me doing, is lots of short little strokes that join up so that I didn't end up snagging the fabric and getting a funny kind of like messy mark when I was doing this. It was a little bit more time consuming to do it this way, but it actually gave me a bit more control. You can even see me holding down a bit there with my hands just to try and make sure that the fabric is as tight and as taut as possible when I'm actually trying to do the nice, careful, thin lines on it. And I have to say at this point that I was impressed with the ultra fine nib. It really did give me a very, very fine and very, very thin controlled line. And I finished off the rest of the letters working from left to right so I wouldn't smudge any of the freshly applied ink because they didn't dry instantly. They would probably stay wet for a couple of minutes before they fully dried. Now, to colour the interior of each of the letters, I decided to switch over to the fine nib and use it sort of angled on its edge a little bit so that I got a thicker fill of colour. So I will be able to fill each of the letters with colour quicker than if I was just using the ultra fine nib. So that's why you can see me using this a lot less vertically than I use the ultra fine nib. I'm trying to cover the letters and get a nice sort of area of colour down nice and quickly, sort of a flat colour. And my aim with the letters is to do it slightly sort of graffiti style. So that is why you can see I haven't gone right to the very edge of my outline that I'd done. I've left a little bit of white fabric in between the outline and then the solid colour that I'm putting on the inside. And the other thing that I want to do, and you should know by the colours that you've seen me choose for this, is I want to go from dark to light. So I'm looking at dark colour at the very top, and then I'm hopefully going to get successively lighter with each of the other blues that I use, going all the way down to the bottom of each of the letters. One of the things that impressed me about just the regular fine nib was the way that I could alternate between a very, very fine line and a much thicker, flatter area of colour very, very quickly and very, very easily. And you might have seen already that sometimes when I'm trying to do a little bit that's a little bit more detailed, you'll see me hold that fine nib up and I will do it a little bit more angled. You can see me switching back to using the ultra fine nib at this point, just to tidy up some of these edges and make some of those lines a little bit more uniform. But for the rest of it, when I'm adding the rest of the colours, I mainly use just the fine nib, and I knew that by using it and that angled edge I could get a nice thick swatch of colour put down. But if there was a bit where I suddenly needed to go a little bit more careful, a bit more detailed, all I had to do was raise the pen so it was a bit more vertical, and the nibs that were quite solid and quite sturdy would be able to give me a fairly fine line as well, without maybe having to revert back to going with the ultra fine nib. So I like the versatility of the nibs. One of the other things that I liked was because the marker ink didn't dry straight away, you could actually blend these, like you might markers on paper. Because they were still damp, if you went straight in with the next colour that you wanted and you flicked that colour up and into the colour that was on there and was already wet, you could sort of blend the two together, and hopefully you can see that I've done that a little bit with the blues as I work from the top to the bottom so far already. And definitely when I flip the markers in a second and I go on to the lightest marker, I'm able to put that marker on and flick it up and into the marker colours that are already on there, and it looks as though you're getting a bit of a blend. And that was all achievable because the markers did stay wet for a little bit on the surface of the fabric. They didn't dry straight away. I think with the shades of blue I would have liked to have seen a few more transitional colours in between this blue that I'm using here, which I think was the very palest lightest blue, and then the mid blues. There's a fair jump that I have to try and hide there by blending the light into the dark. And then you can see me just come around the edge here with the mid colours, with the mid-tones of blue, and I'm just going along those edges to try and give it the effect that the colour inside is kind of sunk and the white edge is kind of raised. And once I had that technique that worked on the letter T, I was able to roll that out to the E, the A and the M, just trying to tweak a little bit as I went along to try and make those medium blues a little bit lighter as I went along. So the way I did that was just by going over them a little bit less. The markers could be layered so that if you went over lightly, then you would get a lighter colour, but if you went over it 2 or 3 times, you would get a successively darker layer of colour on the fabric. And you can see my ongoing struggles to try and keep the fabric taut with my left hand as I go along. There's the finished word team on the back of the t-shirt. It was on a 100% cotton t-shirt, and I was impressed with the precision that I was able to get, the brightness of the colours, and also how easy the markers were to use just straight out of the box. I actually designed 2 t-shirts with these markers, and there they are, and you can see I use quite a lot of colour from the markers in the red targets, the blue lettering, and also the different lettering underneath. And I would say that when I was doing a lot of solid colour, some of the markers started to run out fairly quickly, and you can see that trying to use as much colour as I could and get as much colour as I could out of on these green lily pads, I have bobbled the surface of the fabric a bit. I like these fabric markers. I just wish that they had a colour written actually on the pen itself, or maybe a number, serial number on the pen for the correct colour. And I also think that they're probably not best suited for large areas of colour, probably smaller patches and fine line effects like you can see on the box cover art. You can follow me on all the different social medias under the handle gmassamart, and you might also want to click on some of the links on this page for other first go videos that I've done. Thanks for watching.